Hello everyone, today I'm here with Petr Sullivan. Anyone who watches Star City Games Open Series probably knows who you are. You're also a game designer, also known for playing many burn decks. I would like to ask about that a little bit later. How is it going today?
Things are good. Right now I'm kind of working 3 jobs between Scopely, who's like a mobile studio that I'm working with on a project, Wizards of the Coast for some remote design work with them, and then all the content stuff I'm doing with Star City. So like every day I have a list of like 25 tasks, all of which take 5 to 10 minutes to do, but like I need to make sure I do all of them. So it's a lot of like little bits of work so the management's a little stressful, but you know, the work itself is really fun.
It's kind of crazy. Most people during this Corona time like don't really have that much to do, but you have like 3 jobs. That's just like insane.
Yeah, I got really fortunate. I lost my job at Direwolf towards the end of 2019 and was sort of scrambling to drum up some contracting work and figuring out what I wanted to do next. And then COVID hit in the US really hard around March, and then a lot of game design studios became a lot more interested in pursuing remote arrangements. So I've actually been busier the last 2 years than I've ever been in my entire life as far as work goes. So I'm one of the very, very fortunate ones, definitely on the American side, but still pretty hectic. The work's good, but I don't do a very good job of keeping track of like 50 different balls in the air all at the same time, and that's unfortunately what my work is now. But that's really the only downside thing. It's going really well besides.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned you work at Direwolf. I think you worked as a game designer for the game Eternal. Is that correct?
Yeah, I worked there from the summer of 2016 until November of 2019.
Mm-hmm. I don't really know that much about the game, but it's a card game. Is it similar to Magic? Because I know a lot of Magic players are working there, so there has to be like some similarities, right?
Yeah, the game engine definitely has some similarities. I think that a lot of the sort of the foundation for Eternal was let's explore Magic's game engine, but let's lean into some things that are particularly fun for a digital only space. So, for example, the colored mana system. Mm-hmm. If you like in Magic, you play a mountain. The mountain can tap for red mana.
I'm sorry.
So if you play a mountain in Magic and tap it for a red, then you know you have a red mana. In Magic, you basically, in Eternal rather, if you play the equivalent of a mountain, you have a red symbol, and then you can cast anything that requires a single red for the rest of the game. So if you have 3 mountains and 3 islands, you can cast 2 triple blue spells or 2 triple red spells. So that's like a slight difference on the resource system. And then the way the stack works is quite a bit different. There's fewer response windows. So like I can play a creature and play an enchantment, and you, the opposing player, don't always have a response window to that sequence. So there are some differences, but there's a lot of similarities as well.
It's interesting that you're saying that. I actually never thought of the fact that, you know, because Magic was, you know, at the beginning it was a card game, maybe it damages it in certain ways because, you know, there are some systems in the game that just like you could make them online, but they wouldn't be possible as in the actual card game. Do you think that's maybe bad for Magic, that, you know, there are just like certain things that you cannot do in the game because of that?
Well, digital products, Magic Online and Magic Arena, are definitely like, they are high fidelity to paper Magic. They could have chosen to take some liberties and make the game engine slightly different to make it better for digital, but they want to be loyal to the paper game. I don't know if it's upside or downside. Like I think part of what makes Magic awesome, it's like it's been around for forever compared to how long these games usually last, and it suggests that like it could be around for the rest of your life. Like what other games out there that are card games really exist that way? And if you have to make some concessions to the paper digital, you know, the occasional dissonance that you're speaking to support a game that's like probably going to outlive me, like I think that's a cost worth paying.
That makes sense. So you quit working there 2019, and then you started working as a remote designer for Wizards. I'm not a native English speaker. Remote means that you're not like a full-time employee. You're just like kind of helping them. Do I understand it correctly?
That's right. So to clarify first, I was fired, not quit from Dynamo.
Oh, okay.
So,
I didn't want to be mean, so like.
No, it's all good. No, it's all good. So I live in Denver, Colorado. So for non-Americans, if you basically split the country up into like the most east, second, third, and then most west, I'm in like the third section. Wizards of the Coast is up in Seattle, which is the northwestern corner of the country. So I work an hour ahead of them, and before COVID, the plan was I was going to fly out there every once in a while when it was like high leverage time, like it would be useful to have me in the office, but mostly I was working from home. I only took one trip out there in February because COVID shut all that down.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen once travel restrictions are a little bit easier, because we've gotten into a good groove with me working from home and then receiving my work and me being involved in meetings. You know, we'll sort that out, I think, when travel's safe again. But the initial plan was for me to fly out like once every few months for a few days.
So how does it actually work out? Like, for example, a new set comes out and you're like helping them with certain things, or like what kind of task are you actually like doing? If you can say, if it's like a secret, obviously you don't have to.
So in 2020, initially, like I was hired by Play Design to contract with them. And so there's a lot of things that Play Design does. There's like play testing, there's file reviews, there's like leaving comments on files that are in progress. There's basically communicating with set leads about things you see that you like and don't like. That was good, but it is challenging to work remotely. Like, so much of what Play Design does is the actual play testing, and using sort of the remote tools and trying to coordinate, like there's 4 sets going on at the same time. Working not exactly by yourself, because there's like team messaging, but it's not the same as being there in person. It is a greater challenge. So for 2021, I've moved much more into the initial design side of things, where instead of like working in Play Design and working on like 4 sets at the same time, I'm on a team working on 1 set at a time, and much more in the initial stages. Like, what are the mechanics? What are the things that we think are fun or not fun, or we want to promote about the set, or temper down a little bit. Much more about doing that and then turning the file over to Play Design, rather than working on Play Design with everything kind of all at the same time.
In the complete beginning, you mentioned that you kind of have 3 jobs right now. I missed what was the first one. It was like Wizards, Star City, and what was the third one? If you can repeat.
Currently contracting for a mobile studio called Scopely. The thing they're probably the best known for is Star Trek Fleet Command, which is like a very popular mobile game. Basically have me on like a full-time retainer. Like, the project that I'm working on right now is like a 35 to 40 hour a week commitment. And then WotC is closer to like 5 to 15 hours a week, depending on where the file's at. And then the Star City stuff is, another X hours, but a lot of that I can kind of do on my own time, evenings and weekends. I can write articles and stuff like that.
Is the job for Star City mainly just writing articles, or is it like other stuff as well?
So I'm doing the YouTube series, Recurring Insight, which is once a week. I sort of unpack a single design in Magic's history for a few minutes. Cedric and I have been doing the Receivables podcast, which we've been posting about once a week, where we do a deep dive into like a single set. So like the Future Sight review just went up, and we talk about the set, and also like I was playing Magic really competitively like 15 to 20 years ago. So the sets that fall into that timeline, I talk about like playing in Pro Tours and Grand Prix at that time. And, Cedric has a lot of the same stories. So there's a podcast a week, a video a week, and an article a week, roughly, that I'm doing for them as well.
I actually remember you being like a competitive player when I was like a kid and watch coverage. Like, you were often there. Were you like an actual pro, or were you just like one of the better players? I don't actually remember.
I guess that more modern parlance would be like Silver Pro, like fringe rival league. I don't have any Pro Tour top 8s. I played, I think, in somewhere between 15 and 20 Pro Tours, some Grand Prix top 8s, some Pro Tour caches. So like I hung around for a while, but I was never like one of the 50 best players in the game at any point.
I remember that like a lot of the times you played Burn, was it more that people just made fun of you, or were you actually playing it all the time? Like,
I was playing it a fair bit, but it got to a point where like I was working a full-time job and I had like other commitments, and like play testing 50 hours a week trying to find the best deck and play it well was just not a thing I had the time or energy for. So a lot of it is, I feel like with very little practice, I can play a deck like that better than I can play a different deck that might be better, but takes more time to get the reps. The last Pro Tour I played in was the Dragon's Maze Pro Tour, and I don't know if Boros was the best deck for that event, but I do know that when I was playing Esper Mirrors against LSV and PV, I was getting my head kicked in. So it's like, I can't go to the Pro Tour and do this, right? Like, I have to be able to play well to have a shot, and I've sort of defaulted to that over the years.
I see, that explains it. I was just wondering whether you were like a burn guy because you just like to burn people, or if there was like any other reason. Was it just like a combination, or as you're saying, you just thought it gave you the best chance to win?
I do enjoy playing those decks. Like, I like playing with cheap cards. I like trying to get on top of the game. I like eking out wins before my opponent has some like massive advantage. Like, I do like viscerally enjoy that experience. But a lot of it is just like like I said, the deck's usually always at least decent. Like, it's rare that the deck's awful. It's at least competitive in most formats most of the time. So I don't feel like I'm showing up with... Most of the time, I don't feel like I have a deck that's unplayable. It's at least decent. And I feel like being able to play that deck like an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 is way better odds than playing the best deck as like a 4 out of 10 or a 5 out of 10.
Most people who are watching this video probably know you from your STG commentary. You're doing that for a very long time, but how did that actually happen in the beginning? It's always kind of an interesting story. I talked to Manny Davodi yesterday, and he told me, yeah, I just like messaged this guy, this happened, like they were missing someone, I just like showed up. Do you have a story like that, or was it just like, I don't know, what happened there?
Pretty much. I mean, early Star City Games was like, I compare it, maybe it makes sense for more American listeners, but like the professional wrestling, like very early on, it was like just very small, very regional before it became like a huge thing. So Star City was like running these tournaments for a long time. And sometimes they would have coverage and sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes they'd be 1 day, sometimes they'd be 2 days. It wasn't like what it became in 2015, where it was like coverage all the time, 2-day events, like super structured. So what happened was Star City was having these events all over the country, and they were like, who do we know in Los Angeles that we could trust to do an event? Who do we know in Phoenix that we could trust to do an event? Like, they had just people who wrote for the website or someone who knew someone would get a shot. So I got a couple cracks early on because I was out on the West Coast and they would do something in San Diego or Los Angeles, and like I was just someone they knew and trusted. And as time went on and things started getting more successful, they were like, okay, now we want to have like 9 commentators or 8 commentators, and like we're willing to pay for flights and hotel rooms now, so we'll send them around. And over time, it got just like tighter and tighter. It went from like 10 people to 8 people to 6 people. And I made the cut each time, fortunately. So early on, it was just like, oh, we know we can put you in front of a camera for 2 days and you're not going to embarrass us, so we'll give you a shot. And it went well enough that they were willing to give me shots at it until it got down to like 2 or 3 commentary teams, and Cedric and I were one of the ones selected.
Did you actually wanted to do it, or was it more like they just needed someone and you were willing to help? Like, did you enjoy doing it?
Both. I mean, so where my game design career was 10 years ago was like, all right, so I worked for Upper Deck, and that was like criminal organization, basically, and like lost my job.
Wow.
Then I went to work at Cryptozoic. We were partnered with Blizzard. We like lost the WoW TCG license, and then suddenly we like had to scramble to figure out what the next thing was going to do. And worked over at Stoneblade, and like Soulforge got a lot of backing, but it was just like kind of too ambitious of a project for where the company was at and the resources that we had. I got to this point where I'm like, I don't want to have all of my eggs in one basket. I don't want to just have one job and always be at risk of losing it. So I want to just be able, if I could do 4 things 10 hours a week, I would feel a lot safer than doing one thing 40 hours a week. Because if I lose one thing, I still got other stuff going on. So part of it was, I guess I had an interest in doing the commentary stuff. Like, it was fun to me, and I've always enjoyed like talking about Magic more than really playing it. So it made some sense. But I was at a point where I just sort of wanted to diversify my professional portfolio a little bit, because the last full-time jobs I had, like, it always felt shaky, and then they got pulled out from under me. And Like in the United States, there's like no social safety net. Like there's no universal health care. There's no like unemployment benefits suck. Like if you lose your job for a little while, it can be really, really bad in a way that isn't true in a lot of like Western Europe and Nordic states. So I felt that pressure on me all the time. And being able to sort of diversify what I was doing made a lot of sense.
Were you good since the beginning? Because I don't actually remember the beginnings of your career. I obviously saw you commentating many times, but I think you were already kind of pretty good. Like you did it for quite some time at that point. So did you very good from the beginning, or like what do you think about that?
I mean, I'm sure if I went back and watched the early tapes, I'd be embarrassed. I guess I was good enough that they thought I was worth continuing to invest in. Like anything else, you just kind of get better at it over time. The thing that I did notice when I early on, I would go back and I would listen to my recordings because I was like interested in getting better. And the thing that really jumped out at me was I was saying and like and those kind of pauses a lot. So the thing that I really had to train myself to do was if you don't know what you're about to say, just pause for a second. Like just take a second and collect your thoughts and then start talking, because the ums and ahs just sound really bad, especially when you're doing it over and over again. And I think that's if you went back and watched my early shows, I'm sure that would be all over the place. But I did an okay job of training myself out of it.
Mm-hmm. I think even Paulo Vedor Rosa said that you might be his favorite commentator, like out of everyone. I think he mentioned Cedric Phillips as well. Did you guys know each other even before starting commentating, or why do you make such a good duo?
So we go back. We grew up probably about a 9-hour drive from each other. Mm-hmm. So by United States Magic grinding standards, that's pretty close. You end up at a lot of the same tournaments when you live about that far away. And we had a lot of mutual friends, and we hit it off pretty well. I mean, we share a lot of the same interests in like sports and professional wrestling, and so we have a lot to talk about. We've always gone along really well. I think he's a really easy person to get along with, from my perspective at least. So we've always had pretty good chemistry. The thing that we tried was a lot of early Magic commentary. No one has a broadcasting degree. Everyone's just like trying their best. Yeah. And so you have two people in the booth, and they're just sort of talking about the game, like two friends watching a stream. That's a lot of what early Magic broadcasting is. A lot of it's still like that. And we said, there was one show where we said, Cedric, you're just on play-by-play. And Patrick, you're just on color. Someone should have told us to do this like ages ago. But we had the idea of like, let's actually try to do like a broadcast for one show. And at the end of it, we were both like, oh, wow, that felt so different. That felt like a real broadcast for the first time. So we've always got along well. We've been friends for a long time, but the stuff in the booth, I think there's just some synergy there. There's something that I can't really describe where it's just easier for us to work with each other than it is for us to work with most people.
It's interesting. You mentioned the play-by-play thing. So basically, for people who don't know, one player, one commentator just basically says what one of the players played, and the other one is more like an expert who explains the stuff. What if because you're both pretty good players, what if the expert like misses something obvious and says something that doesn't make sense? Does the play-by-play guy like should he tell him that he like missed something, or how do you go about that?
It depends. Sometimes the action's moving so fast that you just have to move on. Like you can't just be going back and correcting things all the time. Cedric has, if I miss something, which is like not infrequent, Magic's really hard. Yeah. A lot of the times I'm covering players who are better than I am. I can't always see people's hands. Like there's all that, right? No one can bat strictly covering it from the color perspective. Cedric has little cues that he'll drop in. Like he'll mention a card, he'll mention a mode on a planeswalker, or whatever the thing is that I've missed, that allows me to sort of jump back in and say either, oh, I made a mistake, blah, 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 or the line that I suggested is probably worse than this other thing because of this consideration. So it's really rare. It happens every once in a while, but it's really rare for Cedric or any play-by-play person to go like, you can't do that. That thing has pro red or whatever the miss is. But there are little subtle ways for the play-by-play person, if they're on top of it, to sort of clue in the color commentator that they may have missed something.
Mm-hmm. It's gonna be all for today. Thanks for your time. It was awesome. Before I cut the video, maybe you want to tell people where they can find you on internet. I already mentioned Star City, but maybe you have Twitter as well, or anywhere else.
So the only public social media that I have is Twitter. I'm at Basic Mountain. For my Magic content, I have a weekly column called Sullivan Satchel. That's sort of a recurring mailbag questionnaire. So it would be really useful if you wanted to email me a question over at mailbag@starcitygames.com, or you can DM me on Twitter. The best question each week also gets $25 in SEG credit, so you might actually win a prize. And then you can find the rest of my content on YouTube, both the recurring Insight video series and then the Receivables podcast with Cedric, which is also available on Spotify and a bunch of other podcast apps.
If you guys like the video, please click on the like and subscribe button, and see you sometime. I don't know. Bye bye.